Well guys, I just got done riding the new Ducati Desert X, and let's get one thing out of the way right now. It is really good. Let's check out some riding footage, and then we'll come back and we'll kind of talk about all the things that go into this bike that make it, well, really good.
I saw your mullet and my sleeves leather.
You got more pockets than a... Yeah, got some?
I got oxygen, so I'm good.
Look at this thing. Pull it on my helmet. Oh, yes, dude, I'm in.
Tonight we're running on the right track. I know we never gonna look back. Oh, I just wanna have a good time. Call me whatever. I'm not doing anything like that. We don't wanna do so tonight we just let go. To the beat in the streets, every freak out singing like. Singing like. Party like. Freaking out. To the beat till we freak out singing like. Singing like. Party like. Freaking out. To the beat till we freak out singing like. Where's the fun in doing what you're told? I don't mind even though I lose control. Oh, I just wanna have a good time. So call me whenever. 'Cause a night like this, it never gets old. Oh, no, we don't wanna do slow-mo. So tonight we'll just let go. To the beat in the streets, every freak out singing like. So baby, come and take my hand tonight. And know that everything will be right when we dance and we fall and we don't carry on. Now we just sing the la 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 la.
So what is it that makes the Ducati Desert X really good? Well, it starts with its own dedicated frame which Ducati built. So it's not a frame from a different bike that they just put long travel suspension on. This is a dedicated steel Torellis frame, and the geometry that's built into this is also what helps this bike shine really just through everybody else, man. It outshines every other adventure bike that I've ridden as far as first impressions go, and then as far as stability and the size of it. You know, it's got a really nice slim profile, and they designed this frame and the rider ergonomics around an adventure rider standing up on the bike, and the bike feels really good when you're standing. When you're sitting on it, maybe like on an asphalt road, it almost feels good to stand up on it. That's how good it feels off-road when you're standing up on it. It's just built for that. It still has a 5.5 gallon tank like everybody else on the market, but Ducati's kept that really slim. And then that travels all the way down through to the foot pegs there. And that V-twin motor being narrow as well, this is one of the most narrow adventure bikes that I've ridden, and it's also not intimidating at all whatsoever. It's really surprising when you kind of throw your leg over it and you get it off-road. You're like, this thing is really manageable, unlike some of the super huge adventure bikes or some of the really aggressive ones. And some adventure bikes have a larger tank that your knees kind of hit. This bike feels great. It really kind of blew me away. It's one of the best feeling adventure bikes right out of the box. The handlebar bend on it is like great. I wouldn't change them. I wouldn't run out and buy bar risers, but I've never been the type of person to do that. So dedicated frame, okay, that's good, but what makes it feel really good? It has 27 degrees of rake up front, which actually 27.4, which gives it a lot of stability. A lot of adventure bikes trade off and give you a little bit less rake, so the forks will be more straight up and down. and it turns better on asphalt, but then you kind of lose out when you get in deep sand or mud. You end up kind of with this bike that pushes the front, or if you're in a turn with some loose gravel, you'll lose the front right away. Man, this bike is planted and tracks really, really well. So the frame and the geometry are really good. The way it feels is really good. The gas tank, the positioning on the bike, all pretty much perfect. Nobody complained about it. We had some riders out today that were under 5'7", and Jordan Graham is probably the tallest of the bunch, probably 6'4" maybe. He might be 6'5". I run in at like 6'2", 220 pounds, and you know, the bike is just fits me great. A lot of bikes do, but this one feels really good, and it's not intimidating when it's between your legs. The other thing that makes this bike feel really good is obviously the suspension has to be good, and this has KYB units. Front and back, 230 mil of travel in the front and 220 mil of travel at the back. 220 is the kind of industry standard, so it has a little bit extra up front, but it has 250 millimeters of ground clearance, and that really shined through going through some like rockier sections where a normal bike would bottom out. This bike, just the skid plate never touched a rock, and that was kind of nice to not have to brace for those kind of impacts or have those. Ducati's also, speaking of the skid plate, put a really good skid plate on it as a accessory, so you don't have to wait for a manufacturer to make a good skid plate like somebody aftermarket. The factory option seems to be well designed and made for adventure bike riders, so it just kind of, as you're riding this bike and you're seeing it, you're like, man, this whole thing is really set up well for adventure bike riders, because Ducati didn't make this bike to be a good street bike, although it is a perfectly great handling street bike. Where it really shines is off-road and just comfort and usability. Back into the suspension, it's fully adjustable front and rear, preload, compression, and rebound. I threw in a little bit of extra compression. Actually, I've got the compression turned in quite a bit, and an extra 2 turns of preload, so 2 millimeters up front, and I've probably got about 6 millimeters of preload out back. And you know, I've got the compression turned up a little bit, and then the rebound, I like my rebound to just be neutral, so once the bike lands on a jump, it just kind of goes back to a nice neutral state. Speaking of jumping, this bike jumps really, really well. I have never been on a press launch with so many jumps in it, water bars and kind of little jumps on the trail. And every time the bike left the ground, it was really well sorted out, and I think that's because this has a direct link between the frame and the swing arm is the shock. There's no linkage back there, so it doesn't do anything weird when you send it off a jump. Feels really good and natural, and you can actually kind of move it around in the air, which you can't do that with most adventure bikes, even in this middleweight 1000cc kind of category. Nice little jump. So the suspension's almost flawless. You know, we did have the Pirelli Rally STR tires on there, so they're like a not super aggressive, almost 50-50 tire. So couldn't push it too hard. Plus this gravel out here in Colorado can be a little intimidating because it might break loose, it might not. But then when we got into the rock gardens and stuff, and I was riding it off-road, it's a really good off-road bike. Right from the factory. Just jump into the suspension, set it up how you want it. One negative about the suspension would be fork dive. It's got quite a bit of fork dive on road if you get a bunch of front brake. And you can kind of mitigate that if you add a little fork oil to the forks. You know, people will tell you don't do that. I usually add about 40 cc's of fork oil per fork leg, and that'll help out also keeping the front end a little bit higher. But you know, that's up to you. But really, like, the bike, for it to have a little bit of fork dive is fine, because this thing feels really good off-road, and it doesn't there's no harsh kind of initial bumps. All the initial little bumps and rocks feel really good. you've got to have some compromises when you take it on road. The fork dive could also be because that it has Brembo M50 calipers up front, huge, you know, monoblock calipers. They come stock on a lot of larger adventure bikes now. This bike being under 500 pounds wet is not really as big as some of the full 1200 cc category bikes. Okay, so it has a dedicated frame, really good frame geometry, ergonomics are perfect, and the suspension's very good from the factory stock. It also has really great wheel setup. For the first time, Ducati's put a 2118 wheel set on a modern bike here, and it just again shows that their dedication towards adventure riding really shines through with this bike. That and then the all steel kind of pedal for the brake pedal and for the shifter. You can get your boot under there really easy. It seems really robust. It's set up for someone to ride it. So, you know, everything that we've seen so far has pointed us more towards this bike is set up for an adventure bike rider, and Ducati took it very seriously. Another thing that they did was they gave us all the options when it comes to the rider aids and electronics. Jumping into that 5-inch display, it's vertically mounted, which is pretty cool. I didn't spend too much time looking down at it while standing. You can read it really easily when you're seated. You can look down and get a gear position. The tachometer, you could have it in a bar or in a traditional kind of circular tachometer with a needle there, and that's really nice because some manufacturers try to reinvent that and, you know, why bother? The display is very easy to use, and it's real easy to jump into all the rider modes. Another neat thing is that this bike may be the closest thing, or it actually may just be perfect, but it's the closest thing to a perfect user interface that I've seen from a manufacturer so far. So when we got these rider modes and rider aids, you know, sometimes it would go from like an off-road mode back to an on-road mode when you keyed it. This bike doesn't do that, and it also remembers all your settings. You don't have to reprogram anything. You shut the bike off, key it off, you're in rally mode. You key it back on, it's still in rally mode. Your traction control is still off, your ABS can still be off. This bike has 6 modes on it. The 2 modes that I kind of stayed in were rally and enduro mode, and then, you know, sport mode when we got on the asphalt here. Every mode is customizable, and you can customize the throttle kind of response. There's a lot of options there for that. You can dial into Ducati wheelie control, multiple levels for the Ducati traction control, and also the ABS is actually very tunable, which is nice because some people like it one way and I like it a different way. My favorite way to run a bike with its ABS setup is to run a non-intrusive rear ABS if it's possible, because it kind of saves you. You can get on that rear brake pedal and it'll slow you down, but you won't lock up the rear if you come into a turn a little too fast, and you won't stall out the bike if you're too aggressive on the rear brake. Some guys just like to be able to lock up the rear bike or the rear wheel and slide it around. That's fine. This bike will give you all those options, and it actually comes in like a couple different levels. Without going into great detail about it, there's off, level 1, which is you can lock up the rear wheel. Front wheel operates in an off-road mode. Level 2, you can lock up the rear, but it'll slide and it'll kind of release it gently. It works really well. That's where I kind of left it all day because it's a safety net. I don't need to lock up the rear tire to get a turn done. Some guys think you need to, or you want to just do cool skids. That's fine if you want to do that, but mode 2 for me is that nice safety net. It keeps the bike running. Actually never stalled the bike out. For the throttle maps, there is a like high power mode, or full power mode, high power mode, medium, and then a low. Low brings this bike down to 75 horsepower, and the full mode is all 110 horsepower. One thing that I have to kind of hold back on, you know, comparing with this bike is actually the 110 horsepower, because we're at elevation. We're at almost 9,000 feet just here at this resort, so I can't really say whether this bike is like a true ripper, but at these elevations, you know, you can feel it. It does have a little bit of a handicap at these heights. We never really got down past, I think, 6,000 feet if we were lucky. So the verdict is still out on this motor, but it's not frantic. The power delivery on it is perfect. It's super smooth. So One thing I never really liked about the big V-twins is that they're kind of rough and rumbly, and I really just don't like having to shift them when they kind of, like if you're a little bit too low in the RPM. This motor's super smooth. It's 937 cc's. It's tuned specifically for this bike. It comes in some of the other models. Second gear, slow speed stuff. That Ducati makes, but this setup for this bike, it's a really amazing power plant, and the vibrations are almost non-existent. And even though we had the Terminagi slip-ons on this bike, it isn't very loud, so it keeps everything kind of calm. You know, even when you're ripping on it, you can hear it. The intake howl is really good, but nothing feels frantic. So user-friendly, responsive, and it's kind of just makes riding an adventure. It does the adventure bike thing really, really well. When you get into the throttle and you're really on it, and especially off-road, it picks the front end up really easily. Predictable. Power slides are really nice. It's really quite a great package and motor. Now, transmission-wise, this bike actually has a shortened first through fourth gear. Maybe fifth is shorter, but the big thing is that first gear is 14.7% shorter than, say, on the 950 Hyper Motard. It makes getting the clutch out super easy. It makes tight technical trails easy. Rocks super easy. Picking the front end up. And second gear is also 8% shorter as well, so you don't have to run out and re-gear this bike, which is nice. Again, it's pretty amazing to see that Ducati went in and really just went for it with this bike and just said, you know what, we're building an adventure bike. We make great sport bikes, but this is what we want to build. And it's going to stack up against the competition. Really, it's going to be hard to beat at. One thing that you could maybe complain about is the price tag, but it prices itself right in, and all the middleweight adventure bikes have kind of grown to this price of about $17,000, which this bike is. And you know, fit and finish wise, it's beyond expectations. Value for money, if you're riding it and you're enjoying it and you're having a good time on it. I don't really put a big emphasis on trying to save, you know, $1,000 here or $2,000 there. And then, you know, you could get into something like a Yamaha T7. Not even close to this bike, performance-wise, suspension-wise, feel, fit and finish. You know, you don't get the premium parts. It's got Brembo brakes, Brembo master cylinders, hydraulically actuated slipper assist clutch with Brembo master cylinder up front, and the clutch feels really good. It's got this great positive engagement. It's just a well sorted out bike from start to finish, and that's why I'm so excited about it, is because it's like really, I can't come up with too many things that I don't like about it. And Ducati has available accessories, like it's got that rear 2.1 gallon rear tank, so you can feel like you're a Dakar racer from the 1000cc Dakar days. They're also going to have available a rally seat, one piece. Awesome to see that from a manufacturer. Crash bars look really good on it. The skid plate is mounted really well. And the whole package, the whole bike is just kind of built around adventure bike riding, and it's built really well. I'm just blown away. And it seems to be a perfect bike. So if you wanted to get into, like, why wouldn't you buy it? It would just kind of depend on what you want. If you want something that's maybe more street oriented, or maybe a little bit more frantically paced as far as speed goes, there's some other bikes out there. But for the middleweight kind of adventure bike category, you know, bikes are getting really good, and this one is spot on, like really one of my favorites. Could I see myself owning one? Absolutely. What else is there to talk about? How does it feel off-road? Off-road, it's got a lot of confidence, and the geometry with the frame and everything, and the way that the suspension works, really was never intimidated by anything. No kind of sudden herks or jerks. It's also got a steering stabilizer on it, which comes in handy because it still kind of wants to hook things like a rock. If you've got one to the side, it'll still kind of want to hook it, and that steering damper, you can actually feel it working. And yeah, it looks awesome too. Ducati's kept it simple, one color, one trim level. You can add accessories, and that's it. I hope I've answered all your guys' questions and concerns here. There are some other things like it's got the quick shifter on it. With the lean sensitive IMU quick shifter, it actually knows if you're leaned over or going downhill, so it can adjust its interruption rate for upshifts or downshifts. I personally really like a quick shifter on a bike. It makes, you blow a corner, you can come in, you can get your downshifts done without having to worry about rev matching or clutching, and then carry on your way if you came in that turn too hot. Whereas like maybe you might have to lock it up, you might miss a downshift, you might not rev match properly, you're trying to get your braking done and it can be overwhelming. So I'm a big fan of the quick shifters, and this one being linked to the IMU with the lean sensitive ABS that this bike has. All just super impressive stuff. It's a lot of features, and none of them are intrusive. It doesn't feel like it's overburdened. It doesn't have active suspension. It doesn't have like a radar assisted cruise control like the Multistrada does, but it does have cruise control, heated grips, and all those little bells and whistles that you kind of want, and none that I would say you don't want. I think it comes with everything you kind of ask for. Seat height's a little high at 34.4 inches, but we had a rider that's under 5'7" with us today. He didn't have a problem, and nobody really had a problem with the height of the bike at all, and it was never really talked about. One thing that might be a concern is that the bike runs a little hot. Now, body-wise, you don't feel it on your feet, you don't feel it between your legs. It's just a warm motorcycle, so it's got this little temperature gauge, and if you're working it really hard and some slow technical stuff, especially up here at 12,000 feet where I kind of got the bike to be a little warm, you'll be watching that, and this bike just seems to run a little warm. The cooling fans are on quite a bit. Not really a complaint because it's operating inside of its normal parameters, but it's just something that if you're always like, oh my gosh, the thing's overheating, then don't maybe put a piece of tape over the temp gauge. I think that wraps it up, guys. Super great bike, super confidence inspiring. It's really good. Oh, we could talk about some of the stuff that I talked to Jordan Graham about. So he's going to be racing one of these in the upcoming series that he races in instead of the desert sled that he was racing. He's excited about it. He thinks he's actually going to be faster on it. The motor's much faster, much more horsepower. The transmission's better, but also the suspension's better, the frame geometry's better, and he says that starting from there, this bike is going to be better and faster than his desert sled. I've seen him ride his desert sled. He's very fast on it and very capable. I think it's going to be tough to kind of beat that pace, because when you look at the desert sled, those are not full-size adventure bikes. They got a little headlight, no fairing, and the tank is very small, smaller than this even, and I think they have an advantage there. So we'll have to kind of watch Jordan Graham, see how he does with his desert racing. I'm excited to see all that go down, and when he dives into the suspension and gets it set up for him, I'll kind of message him back and say, hey man, did this thing actually get better? Is it actually faster than the desert sled that he's been racing and winning? Won the Mint 400 on it, won a bunch of desert races, hit National Hare and Hounds. And if he says, yeah, it's better and faster, then there's going to be very little things to complain about with this bike. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Thank you, Ducati North America, for bringing me out and letting me do my thing with the video. If you guys want to check an article out for this, check out ADV Pulse. I write for them every once in a while. They're going to have an article linked with this bike with a lot more details. I kind of wanted to go into like the big features and what it feels like to ride and like why it's a really good bike. So if you want to know any more that really small details and specs, jump into that. Last thing, seat height wise, Ducati's going to offer a low seat and also modified suspension for this bike, so you can get it down around 33 inches. But again, I would sit on it and ride the bike before you complain about seat height. It's really that good, and it feels great. Thanks, guys. See ya. Oh wait, I got to do that. Whew, I'm tired. Hello. Hi puppies. We've got a lot of people coming, about 5 or 6. I saw you hit that jump. I was like, yeah, I'm not doing that. What were you, third for that?
Yeah, just tap.
Woo.
I mean, Huxley's really good.
It looks really, yeah, it looked really good. I'm like, I don't have enough time on the bike to do that yet. I'll just tell everybody that was me.
Yeah, it's fine. We got photos. Just Photoshop your on it.
Yeah. Man, you hit a chicken. Sick.
Chicken killer.
Back there at one of the ranches.
Don't say that.
Did you see it?
Maybe it's still alive. Just blew the eggs out of it.
Catch dinner?
A little bit.
It's on the spokes.
Oh, shit, look at this stuff.